Hello and welcome to PHP Alive and Kicking, brought to you by PHP Architect. This is the podcast that looks at what is new and shiny in PHP and what it's like to earn a living through PHP today. I am one of your hosts, Mike Page, better known as Mike Page Dev. I am a developer at PHP Architect and sometimes a lighting and sound technician. My co-host is a long-time contributor to our magazine, PHP Architect, and now a fellow team member, Christopher Miller. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. This podcast is made better by our partners over at Honey Badger, but more about them later. So this is our first episode, and we thought we would introduce ourselves. So I'm going to hand over to Chris. Let's find out, how did you get into PHP?
So for me, my story actually starts all the way back in 1983. PHP didn't even exist then. And one day, my dad came home from work and he had this box with him. And in this box was a book, a soldering iron, and loads of little electronic bits. So we sat down at the kitchen table and we had some fun. We built this thing together. I helped him to put this thing together. I mean, the amount of help I could give him was limited. At the age of 3, it was like, pass me the green bit. No, the other green bit. No, not that one, the other one. And we built this thing, and that was fun. I mean, we used to do daft stuff like this all the time. And after we built this, I thought, like, that was the end of it. But my dad picked it up and walked towards the television with it. And I was like, what are you doing? So we got to the television, and he plugged this thing in. And then he turned it on, and up on the screen came like this welcome page to the computer we'd just built. It was actually a ZX Spectrum 48K.
Wow.
Back then, 48K of memory was enough to do anything. So I thought that was the end of the fun. But no, there was more. He put a tape into a tape player that he'd also bought, plugged it into the side, and it did this really horrible screechy noise. If you remember what dial-up sounded like, pretty much that.
Yeah.
Because back then you stored all of your software on tape and you played it back as audio. So we watched these pretty colours go up and down on the screen, and then slowly on the screen scrolled down this coloured image of a dragon. I say coloured, it did have 8 of them because that's all they could handle, 8 colours. And I thought, this is cool. And we sat there and we played this game. It was called Oracle's Cave. And it was one of these games where you like said, turn left, walk forward, and you literally typed it in. And this was brilliant. It was eye-opening, the idea of we built this thing that was playing this game. And that was like the first experience of a computer. And I thought, yeah, if we've built something we can play games on. Then out came the book. My dad said to me, one day, these things are going to replace my job. So we might as well learn how to program them now. And it was the instruction manual on how to write ZX Basic. Now, ZX Basic was back in the days where you didn't have things like classes or functions. It was literally top to bottom, and you used things like go to line 30, go to line 50. And loops were pretty complicated in back then. And this was like eye-opening. We programmed a few lines of code and we saw text appear on the screen, like we'd said, and we started changing little bits, and we had this feeling that this was quite eye-opening. Now, I thought my dad knew all of this stuff. Turns out, he told me 20 years later, no, he just read one chapter before me. So he'd read the chapter that we were going to do the next day. And throughout that time, I was learning bits about programming and bits about how to make things happen. And by the age of 12, I was getting articles published in what was Spectrum magazine back then of games that I'd written. And back then you didn't have even Git. I mean, you didn't have the internet, so how could you? The idea was that these magazines literally had the source code printed out in them. And at the age of 12, I was getting stuff published in this magazine of games that I'd written and little things. Went from there, all through school, fascinated by computers. And we got to what the UK calls Careers Day. Not sure what it'd be elsewhere, but the idea being that you went through this whole computer program of what you should be doing in life. So anyway, I get to this computer and it's broken. It's not working properly. So I reboot it, reload the software, answer all of the 300 plus questions that it was asking you, and it came up at the end and said you should do nothing to do with computers, which I thought was hilarious because I just fixed it. But for me, that was a bit of a pushback on what I thought I was going into. But Mum and Dad had spoken to me in the meantime and said, don't worry about it. If you want to go down that route, go down that route. So I left school and went and did a BTEC National Diploma in Computer Studies. But just before I started the BTEC, I'd taken a placement with National Westminster Bank, was NatWest at the time, and they were in the process of rolling out Windows NT across the system, so all over the country. And I got to be with the networking team that were doing all of this across the country. And whilst I was sitting there with them and going out to these places, I was learning this idea of computers could not only talk to, you know, what we were seeing on that screen, but could also talk to other computers. The idea of networking, and that was massively eye-opening. Completely changed where I'd got to. Of maybe computers isn't right for me. I now knew it was. Went and did the BTEC National and learned tons of stuff there. So they taught a programming language that's now pretty much defunct called Pascal. They'd taught assembly language. They'd taught the basics of computer science, so how to read binary, how to read hex. They'd taught about how computers actually work, so how is the memory different to the ROM, and how does storage work, and things like that. Went through and did the 2 years of this and really enjoyed it. So we get to 1999, and everything I'd been taught was on Windows 97. So what happened now? They released Windows 2000 and changed the lot. So everything I just learned was pretty much defunct. Didn't stop me though, because during this we'd seen the startings of the internet, and we were looking at HTML, CSS, the very bare basics of JavaScript, because JavaScript had barely been out by then. And I was fascinated by this, and I thought, I can do this for a living. So I set up the first web development company in Staffordshire. And setting that up got me contracts with councils, got me contracts with little businesses to make websites for them. Now, I say make websites. Let's be honest, the web at that point was pretty text and maybe the occasional image. And you also had to argue with your parents as to, no, I need the telephone because I can't be on the internet without it. Those were fun. Those days were fun when you were downloading something. You were 45 minutes into a download, and then your mum picks up the phone and completely breaks it. But yes, I set this up and sort of augmented it a bit with what I'd learned about networking and how to link computers together. And back in those days, crawling around on the floor, running cables in offices and building star networks, which were, those are long gone. Most of the time these days, we don't even use cables. So built that. But I found that I became ill around 2010 or thereabouts with fibromyalgia. So chronic pain, chronic fatigue. And I wound up the business to a certain extent, supported the odd little customer here and there, and took a few years out to deal with that. Jump forward a little bit to 2011-ish. no, it might have been a bit later, might have been 2014, started looking at applying back to places and was just getting no's. Your skill set's too far out of date. Go and relearn what's changed. So nobody was saying what I was doing was wrong. It just wasn't what was current now. So I was applying for that and getting pretty much everywhere. Just no, not doing it. So I was getting a bit dejected at this point. Oh, well, that career's over. Let's find something else. And I was applying to care jobs and I was applying to, you name it, I applied. But then one day on Facebook came up an advert and it was running down the side of the screen. And it was learn modern development for free. And I thought, right, let's have a look at this. So I clicked into it and it was an advert for School of Code. So at that point, they were a very small company, first cohort that they wanted to try this with. And they invited people to apply to learn or relearn development for free. And there was 20 of us that started on that course. I'd sort of applied thinking, well, what's the worst that can happen here? They were offering a guarantee of a job at the end. At that time, they could guarantee it because Chris had already spoken to multiple people. Chris is the guy that ran it. And we started on this course, and it was teaching full stack JavaScript. So front to back, JavaScript, CSS, and HTML. Now, in amongst this time, I had picked up bits of PHP, so I've been around from PHP 1-ish. Occasionally contributed to bigger PHP things up to that point. Learnt JavaScript, hated every minute of it because it was JavaScript. And I am not a front-end developer. You know that age-old joke of how do you center a div? Well, I still Google that now. So I'd learned all of this and I took a job with a company. Now, this company were using PHP. They'd built their own little framework in PHP that they were using. And I took it with them knowing that PHP wasn't what I'd just learned, but that I understood the principles of programming because I'd done it before. So I picked up on that in that industry, and within a few weeks I was seeing major problems. There were things in that code that most definitely shouldn't have been there. They were also not the greatest of employers in the way that they were handling things, such as telling me that the disability I had was entirely made up. Unsurprisingly, I didn't last very long there. I left that company, and 3 weeks later I was employed with Jump24. Now, at this point, I was really feeling like, this industry has changed far too much. And I really don't like this. Jump24 changed everything. They were using Laravel, which has now become my favorite framework. And they're a Laravel partner, and they know Laravel inside out, back to front, and upside down. And I learned so much in that company. One of the colleagues I worked with, Alex, he taught me way more than I could ever have learned anywhere else. He would take the time to dismantle concepts, reteach me, and that was the point at which the passion ignited for PHP again. It was like, this can do things that I can't do in other languages. Now, yes, there are things that PHP can't do that other languages can, like compiled, but during that time, I was working with an enterprise level application written in Cake PHP. There was multiple little Laravel microservices around that. And over the 3 years I was there, I was absolutely loving every minute of it. There was never a problem with how that was set up to work. And I was learning from every single team member. It got to about 3 years in, and School of Code got back in touch with me. By this point, they'd done a few cohorts and they had the opportunity to go national. So they went national, and they wanted somebody to come in who could teach at a national level, not be worried about talking to groups of people, could help to set the foundations of how to run the company at a national level, that kind of thing. And they asked me to join them for a year to help them out. So I went and joined them and was part of rolling that out from small Birmingham based in person to national Zoom based running 200-person cohorts. And most of my job was teaching students, mentoring students. The other part of my job was installing the software, setting everything up the way that they wanted it. Now, obviously this was going back to JavaScript, but I was also teaching the fundamentals of programming. So I took a slightly different approach to some of the others. So I would teach not only here is the syntax for JavaScript, but here is why this works. In amongst all of this time, I was doing talks regularly for different conferences, including international conferences like Cake Fest and We Are Developers. And that was very much something that became a passion of mine. After that year with School of Code, I went back to Jump 24. The intention was to stay at Jump 24, but I was offered a role that sounded too good to be true. Unfortunately, it was too good to be true. It was with a startup that did observability, and there were problems with it, with the startup nature. I don't do well in startups. I really struggle with the idea of nobody has any clue what they're doing and why. I kind of like a plan, and they didn't. So going through that became back to PHP and using Laravel for the basics, built a product that went out, and then I joined a massive corporate. They were huge, and they were also using Laravel. Those guys were working on a reporting application and data pipeline application. And in that one, I learned a hell of a lot. One of the things I learned was I hate meetings for the sake of meetings. They would have meetings about the meeting they were going to have. They would then have meetings about the meeting they had. And then they'd have meetings to plan the meetings that they were going to have. And everything was meetings. And at that point, I was starting to get burnt out by just too much demand. They wanted far too much out of me for one person. Left there to take a role that was a little less intensive, turned out to be a lot less intensive. And I was kind of left feeling like there wasn't enough to do, and there was no happy medium in the middle anywhere. So that one was an interesting time. Nothing wrong with the guys I was working with, nothing wrong with their software, just not quite the right fit. And this was beginning to become a pattern that I didn't seem to fit. So I sat down and I spoke with a couple of different friends of mine of what's going on here? What am I missing that I want? One of the things that was missing was I want to be able to be in charge of how that works and how the application is built, because part of my nature is to be very, very linear in structuring an app and thinking about the architecture and thinking about, well, what happens if you suddenly have a burst of 1 million people using it. And that led me to apply for the idea of going self-employed, and I started looking around and landed a contract with a company called Browserless. They were JavaScript based again, but they also had elements of PHP and varying other things in there. And whilst I was with them, I was like, again, it was that startup feel, and it just wasn't the right fit. Contract naturally came to an end, and in amongst that, for 18 months leading up to me joining PHP Architect, I've been writing for the magazine. I'd also got invited to speak at Tech 2025, and that was like, I know that this is right. And I just loved what PHP Architect was doing and had done for a very long time. One day, I just messaged John and Eric and said, if you happen to hear of anything, let me know. Because I was just on the lookout for something new to replace what I'd lost. And a couple of weeks later, I had a message that was late my time, early their time, because they seem to live on a different planet, or at least it feels like it. And they just messaged me and said, are you still looking? Pulled me onto a Zoom and said, right, we're in a position to hire. And that was the point at which I joined PHP Architect as a developer, which has now led to me being in a position to write blogs regularly for PHP Architect, which I love doing. Write the articles and to continue doing that as part of my job, to support an enterprise application on Laravel, to work with some amazing developers, to work with Eric, to work with John. The whole thing was just, this is exactly what I wanted. And that leads us to today of 25 years in the industry professionally and 40 plus years developing for fun. So yeah, I've been around for a while.
Yeah, it's going back to your you'd say about writing for the magazine. I don't know how you churn out the amount of articles and blogs that you do. I don't understand it. I know that you've got a backlog of articles that we're trying to bring into the magazine each month. So it's incredible and worthwhile reading your articles. I've enjoyed your articles for quite some time. So yeah, I mean, it's nice, really interesting story, and I think there's a lot of little aspects there that are going to resonate with different people out there. Certainly, dial up,
Yes,
fighting over the phone lines. I remember that.
Yes, I remember it well. It got to the point where I actually had to have a second telephone line put in upstairs because it was like, I can't just keep fighting for the internet. I need it. It's my job.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. We never got to that stage in my household. It was just more just a fight over the phone line who was going to go on the internet, and obviously I lost every single time.
Yes. I mean, with the magazine, one of the things that I've done is I've got a regular column, but I also write feature articles. And the regular column, I'll work ahead. I mean, they've got enough articles until October 2026, so yeah. Perhaps I should slow down a bit. But the next series is something that a lot of people are going to find interesting, which is building AI in PHP.
Oh, that'd be cool. That sounds cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to those. Well, before we move on, I suppose we better hear from our friends over at Honey Badger.
Let me tell you a quick story about our sponsor, honeybadger.io. One time, a customer of theirs had a background job run overnight that caused hundreds of thousands of errors to be reported to Honeybadger by mistake. Like many other error tracking and performance monitoring tools, Honeybadger bills for monthly usage, and so this customer's mistake was going to cost them a lot of extra money that month. If you've ever used a monitoring service, you might have experienced something like this. Well, fortunately for this customer, they emailed Honeybadger's support and received the most amazing reply. Honeybadger was resetting their monthly quota and canceling their bill. This is just one example of how much the small team at Honeybadger cares about their users. Ask anyone you know and you'll hear similar stories. Go check them out at honeybadger.io. It's free to get started and setup takes less than 5 minutes. Don't forget to bookmark it. That's www.honeybadger.io.
Oh,
Thank you, Honey
thank
Badger.
you, Honey Badger.
We might work on that timing. Okay, so let's
Why don't we
yes,
hear your story?
yeah, let's hear my story now. So my story, I'm going to sort of jump back and forwards a little bit because it's going to make a little bit more sense as I go on. So I am mainly a lighting and sound technician within theatres. I hadn't really got a career in place or anything like that. I was going from job to job, whatever job I could get, mainly in retail. And one of the things I decided I was going to do is do some mobile DJing to try and earn a little bit more money. And I had met someone through theatre that was I believe was a web developer. I don't think he was actually a web developer. I think he was more into graphics, but he could help me set up a website. So he was going to help me set up a website and then teach me how to keep it updated. My guess is it was going to be a WordPress website or something of that ilk. Anyway, I basically hadn't seen him for quite a while. He went AWOL, and I'm thinking I need to build a website. I need a website to try and advertise, try and get more work as a DJ, try and get some more work as a freelance theatre technician. So I took it upon myself. I thought, right, okay, I'm going to have a look. How difficult is it really to write code for a computer? Bearing in mind that I'm also dyslexic, but I was told when I was at secondary school I couldn't do anything sort of academic or anything like that. I would have to do something with my hands, be a labourer, be a brickies, those sorts of jobs. So I always thought something like computer programming was above me and I wouldn't be able to do it. So in the end, I decided, no, I'm going to have a look, and I bought How to Build a Website for Dummies. The yellow books, I got it. It was cheap on Amazon. I bought it, and when we were on holiday one year, on the family holiday, whilst the wife was out by the pool sunbathing, I was sitting in the shade with this book reading through, and it starts off with HTML and explaining the real bare basics of HTML. And I thought to myself that this actually makes a lot of sense in my head. This makes sense to me. It's not that difficult. So it kind of made me start to think that actually maybe this isn't as hard as I always thought it was. That then made me go on down another sort of line where I was thinking, I'd always had this idea about a game that I would love to have seen on the market, and I've never seen it on the market. I still don't think it's out there. And bear in mind, I'm now at this point, I'm in my sort of mid-30s. I thought I'll research about game development. It'd be interesting to see how difficult that is. And I started off. I found a blog post, which I will have to try and see if I can find it again, but I haven't been able to for it since. And it was entitled something like, "I'm going to tell you why you should learn C# for game development and not C++. And you're then going to go and learn C++ to do web development." And that caught my eye. I thought, interesting title. You try and tell me to use something else, but you're going to assume I'm still going to go with C++. So I read the article, and it had a really interesting concept, and it was trying to explain the differences between C# and C++, and did a comparison with golf. Bear with me on this one. So it basically said that if you starting off in golf, you've never played golf before, you're not going to go and buy Tiger Woods' set of clubs. They are tailor-made to him, who is a professional golfer and have been playing for many, many years. You want to get yourself something a bit more forgiving and a bit easier to use and get used to, a beginner set of clubs. And that just sort of hit me. I went, okay, well then surely the best thing is to start looking at C Sharp. So I did. I researched and I found some courses on C Sharp, and I started playing around with C Sharp, and built a little command line program that asked you what your name was, asked how old you were, and then printed it all out again. And I was really proud of that. I thought that was so cool. I thought I'm writing computer code. I never thought this was something I could ever do, and I'm writing computer code. Some time went on whilst I was working on this, and at the time I was working in a secondary school, or a senior school for our American friends, or high school, I think they actually call it. I'll correct myself, high school, sorry. I was working as a theatre technician, looking after all the sound and lighting equipment within the school and doing all the productions. And I was starting to really get into the computer side of things, and a position opened up in the school for a IT technician. I thought, I should go for this. Something different. I've been doing the audio stuff for nearly 5 years at that point. So I've been there for quite some time doing that. So I thought, no, maybe I should see if I can do a switch. Anyway, I applied for the job, and they decided to make a sort of hybrid role for me because they didn't want to lose me as the theatre technician, but they needed the help in the IT department. So I kind of ended up doing a bit of both. And whilst talking to them, I sort of, one of the things I said was I have an interest in web development or computer programming at that time. It wasn't really web development. So I was talking about computer programming to try and give me the sort of that little bit of an edge of saying, this is why you should let me come and play with all the computers in the school. I've no idea what I'm doing, but here you go. So kind of try to embellish a little bit on the application. Anyway, they allowed me to go and play with all the computers in the school. And at the time, we were going into a multi-academy trust. If you don't know what that is, that's when schools join and have an umbrella organisation above them that run all the different schools underneath. And so we were teaming up with another high school to create this trust. And there was someone appointed director of IT for the trust. And when I met him, he was explaining to me that the other high school, there was an intranet that had been developed by him. He had written the intranet himself. And that it was written in PHP, and asked me, do you know what PHP is? I said, it's a computer language. Don't know much more past that. I said, well, I'd like you to start looking after the internet because I can't do it anymore with my new role. And we want to start integrating it and bring it into the school I was working in. And that was kind of the beginning of the summer holidays. So over the summer holidays, 6 weeks, I studied PHP almost every single day. I got up early in the morning, spent a few hours going through some courses online. I can't remember which courses it was, but I found courses. I did some research. I tend to like to throw myself into things when I actually start them. So I was looking for things that I could listen to try and learn from. So I Googled podcasts. And PHP Ugly was the first one that came up. So I started listening to PHP Ugly on a regular basis when I'm walking the dog, when I'm in the car driving. That's what I listened to. And joined their community on Discord when I realized there was a community on Discord, and tried to get involved. Now, I probably asked lot more questions than I've ever answered in the Discord, but it was a really nice space for me to go and start to understand the world of PHP. And that's when I heard about Laravel, and I started looking into Laravel. And again, I did some courses online. Again, I can't remember which ones, so I can't reference them, unfortunately. I can't remember where they're from or how I found them. But I started to learn about Laravel. And September rolls round that year, and I'm presented this code base. And it literally was just a zip file. I was just given a zip file. And I looked at it and instantly went, oh my God, this is horrible. No disrespect to the guy. He had learned PHP from scratch himself to build this intranet. It was an idea. I think it was a brainchild of his that he had, and he pitched it to the school, and he learned it, and he wrote it. And there were so many things that I thought, oh, I don't like this. That's not how I've been shown how to do it. Rightly or wrongly, I don't know whether I was shown the best way of doing things or whether he was doing the best way of doing things. But quite quickly, I was then asked to build a new feature within this intranet, which I spent a long time sort of designing and talking to a few people. And I pitched the idea of start to slowly bring it into Laravel to try and make things easier, more organized. And the issue was they didn't feel that they could give me that dedicated time to do that, because I had so many other roles I had to do. But they really wanted this new feature. And then something called COVID happened. And we shut everything down. I then spent all of the first lockdown, 10% of the time changing people's passwords to get back online because I couldn't remember their passwords. And the rest of the time developing this new feature, which I was doing full stack. So I was having to do the front end, trying to work out how CSS worked, trying to work out how to center a div. I don't know if I remember how to do it anymore, so I probably have to Google it again now. And I just started to really having that time to most of the time sitting at a computer writing code. I then realized I'm actually really enjoying this, and I'm understanding it. It's making a lot of sense. And I didn't feel like I was working. It didn't feel like a grind. I then came up with ideas of things I wanted to build because I didn't think they were out on the market. And I do have an application that I am in the middle of developing that is being used by a few of my friends that help organize your over the board chess games. So I play chess quite a lot. And that's one of the things I've started building, and I built that in Laravel. I also I grow bonsai trees. So the actual first application was bonsai trees, an app where you could upload photos, see the progression, keep notes on them, keep track of which trees in which parts and things like that. And I built that in just Laravel. And then I stumbled across Filament, and my head just exploded. And I've rewritten everything in Filament, and I'm a massive fan of Filament. I think anything that's to do with that's CRUD based is just so easy to build in Filament. So I started playing around with that. Still listening to PHP Ugly, and then I'm trying to think. This is around 2020, yes. So the middle of 2020, I'd been kind of trying to push to see if I can move into more of a full-time development role within the school trust, and they just weren't having any of it. I was at the top of my band for pay, so there were no more pay rises for me apart from like government pay rises. And I'm thinking, how can I progress? How can I move forward? And one of the things I started to talk to my wife about was I'm really enjoying what I'm doing with this development. I'd like to have some sort of piece of paper to say I'm good at it. I want a qualification in computing somehow. I left school at 16. Back then, you were allowed to leave at school at 16, and I have GCSEs. One of them is over a C, the rest were below. And over in the UK, for people that don't know, C and above is what you really want, because no one looks at anything below that. I had done an evening class and done a accounting technician course, so I did have a qualification in that. But I really was loving this whole concept of the computers and really getting into it and starting to really understand. Things just seemed to click into place in my head. And I said, well, I'd really like to try and do an A-level. And I can do it through the school. The school can support me. I can sit in classes at the school and they'll be able to sit me for the exams. And my wife then turned around and goes, why just do an A-level? Why don't you look at a degree? And I said, well, I've looked at other degrees in the past. There's other things I've thought of doing, like teaching drama and things like that. So I'd looked at degrees and I thought, I just can't afford it. It's so expensive to do a degree. And then she said, well, isn't there any sort of funding? I said, I'm not sure there is, because I'm too old now. And two, household income, I think, is taken into account. When I actually looked at the student financing scheme in the UK, none of that's taken into consideration. There's only one thing, or two things I should say. One, you live in the UK, and two, you haven't already got a qualification at that level. So I don't have a degree. So, okay, I went, okay, this is doable. I could do this. So I enrolled with the Open University to do a computer science degree. And I'm doing it through the student finance scheme, which I highly recommend to anyone out there that wants to have a change in life and doesn't have a degree yet. Go for it. There's nothing stopping you. You do have to put a lot of time in. I am now 5 years in because I'm doing it part-time. So the quickest you can do it is 6 years because it's a part-time course. I'm 5 years in, but I do have 2 years left because I did do a defer earlier on for various reasons. So I'm now studying a degree. I started it in October 2020. And almost the day after I receive all the paperwork and I start studying the degree, I was looking on LinkedIn and I was looking at PHP developer roles because I wanted to get a feel for what the earnings were like, what was out there, what the market is like for developers. And there was one role. I mean, there was quite a few roles, and they're all like looking for 3 to 5 years experience, and these are for junior developers. All right, 3 to 5 years experience, all of the job after job after job after job, and they're listing 10 different sort of things in there. So you needed MySQL, you needed Vue.js, you need this and that, and there's just like I'm so overwhelmed that I'm never going to be able to work in this industry this way. I'll plug on through the degree and hopefully build some of that experience and some of that proof that I can do this. And then I stumbled across one that said PHP developer, 1 year's experience in PHP and Laravel. And I showed it to my wife, and she looked at it and said, you should apply for that. I said, but I don't really have a year's experience. I don't really meet the criteria. I said, how do you mean? You've been writing code now for the school for almost a year. I said, yeah, but I'm not doing it full time. It doesn't say full time in here. Okay. So I applied after a bit more pushing from the wife. We then researched and looked up the company, and this is something my wife is very good at, all the due diligence and things like that around this type of thing. So we looked up the company and found the owner on LinkedIn, and there was a post saying, we've just received a grant for our upcoming project and we're looking for a new PHP developer. I go, okay, that's interesting. So then my wife said, so I'm slightly put off because my dog is barking. I don't know if you can hear that, so I do apologise. But we'll crack on. I think there might be someone at my front door. My wife then said, you need to message him. I said, you what? Message him on LinkedIn. Yeah, I've applied. It's all right. I've sent my CV over. I've applied. No, you need to message him. I can't do that. I don't know this. And she literally, no word of lie, she took the phone out of my hand and sent a message to him. Just something basic saying, congratulations on receiving the grant. I've sent in my CV. I hope you received it. And I went, oh no, you haven't done that. That's so embarrassing. I can't believe you just done that. I said, no, it'll be fine. Trust me. Okay. about half an hour later, I then got a personal message from the owner of this company saying, "Yeah, I've received your application. We need to talk." So we arranged an interview. I rushed home from the school. The school by then was now reopened, and I was working in the school. Rushed home from the school on my lunch to do this interview. Put on these new headphones on that I purchased. I thought, "Oh, this is great!" Right, Zoom. This is really weird. This is the first interview I've ever done by Zoom. So first of all, I was instantly put off with the fact that the headphones that I had actually bought were sound cancelling headphones, so I couldn't hear my own voice, and it was just so off-putting. And I was trying to explain, and I thought, I can't remove like one ear during the interview, so I left them on and just struggled through this interview, trying to sort of show some enthusiasm about learning more about PHP, but understanding that I still had a long way to go in my development in that area. And I came off the call and just thought, yeah, okay. It was an interesting experience trying to do a Zoom interview. I know I was struggling with the tech side. My side was putting me off. Oh well, never mind. Went back to work. The next day, I received a message from him saying, "Can we have a catch up? Talk about your interview." I thought, okay, here we go. This is the no, we're not going to take you on, but here's a bit of feedback for you. So I got on the call, and he started talking about the lack of experience and the concerns about that, and I was thinking, right, yeah, he's building up to say, no, we're not going to take you on, but whatever he wanted to say. And then he suddenly turned around and says, "I really liked your enthusiasm, I really like your personality, and I think you fit really well in the team, so I'm going to offer you the role." And I literally sat there in silence for I don't know how long, because I just didn't. I'm like, "Oh my, really?" And yeah, so I then started working for that company. I was a solo PHP developer. They specialised in AI and not AI, VR and augmented reality software. They were building a whole new teaching platform for VR, which they wanted the admin all to be in PHP. They needed databases to hold data, and that's basically what I started off working on. And I worked for them for just about 3 years, and I got to the point where I thought, okay, I know my code works, but I don't know if it's any good. I don't know if it's safe, because there was no one there to review. Everyone else were C# developers, funny enough, because all the stuff was built in C# that they were doing. I was just building the APIs for the actual applications to talk to exchange data, and then some admin panels for people to be able to access the data who were running the apps that we were building. And comes around to 2024, the first week. So I was kind of working hybrid. The office was about 45-minute drive for me, but I was working from home, going to the office sort of once a week, once a fortnight. And we got a message for all of us to say we all needed to be in the office for the first week of January of 2024. I thought, oh, this is a bit odd. And anyway, so I go in, the owner pulls me into the office and basically says he's making me redundant because he doesn't have enough work for me. And there is no real call for a full-time PHP developer. So I kind of understood, obviously, where he's coming from, and I kind of knew this was coming. I felt like the work was drying up, and I was actually starting to spend time learning going back to C# and learning how to use some of the softwares that the guys were using to build the apps, thinking I could try and cross-train myself. And that, as soon as I came out of the office, I went straight into PHP Ugly, as it was called then. Discord, and just posted and said, I'm being made redundant. Any jobs going, let me know. And that evening, I get a message from Eric saying, are you still looking for work? Yeah, it's only been a few hours. So yeah, okay, let's talk. Jumped on a Zoom call with him. We had a chat. He pulled John into the conversation. We had a bit of a chat. And that was it. And they said, oh, thanks for your time. And that was kind of it. I thought, okay. Nothing of it. I knew they were talking to other people. I thought there's going to be other people in the community that they would love to work with. And I kind of left it at that. And then about a week later, I get a message from John saying, can we jump on a Zoom call and chat? Okay, we can do that. Yeah. So we jumped on a Zoom call. A few more questions going on. They had a few more questions about me. There was a bit of a question about time zones and stuff like that. And they quite openly admitted the biggest challenge they were concerned about was time zones. So, okay, well, that's fine. I completely understand where you're coming from. I'll do my best to try and help you in that if you took me forward. And that's kind of where the conversation ended. I then went to my band rehearsal and just thought nothing of it. Just thought, they're going to go with someone over in the States because that's just what they need, and I completely understand. And I remember it so clearly. I was sitting there, we're playing through a song, and I'm sitting in my drum kit playing along to this song, and I've got my phone on the stool next to me as well. And I just see a message pop up from John saying, we're going to take a risk with you. And I literally just stopped again, mid playing this song, dropped my sticks. I went, what the? And I had to open it. And the guys were just looking at me, what are you doing? And I just got the job. And that's kind of where I am now. This is why I'm here. And yeah, so this is it. This is how I got here. I got to PHP Architect.
Amazing the amount of trust that Eric and John will put in people that, let's be honest, they don't really know at that point. And that conversation that gets to the point of an offer, it's like, I genuinely didn't think they were going to end up offering me. And
I think some things that help me, so this is something I'm trying to preach to other people when I talk to them, is one thing, I got involved in the community. Okay, I asked a lot of questions rather than answer them. Because I couldn't answer them. I wasn't going to try and answer a question for the sake of answering it and get it wrong. I was asking a lot of questions, but also through my other hobbies, especially chess, me and John and Eric had kind of got a bit of a bond over chess. I had actually given Eric a bit of a lesson once. I've played John umpteen times online and I was the one that actually set up the starts of the PHP Ugly Chess Club on chess.com, and we were running some competitions, some tournaments on there. So they knew me, and that's one of the things. They knew who I was and a bit about me. Yes, they've taken quite a leap of faith with my coding abilities, and my time zones and my working hours, but it's worked out. I'm hoping it's worked out. I still work for them. It's almost 19 months later, and I'm still working for them. So, and I love working for PHP Architect. I love working with everyone that's there. I've learned so much, and I'm continually learning every single day. I didn't pitch myself as a senior developer to them. I pitched myself as a junior developer. So they knew they were bringing on a junior developer that would need support. I think luckily I was able to get up and running quite quickly with some of the projects I was working on when I first started, and managed to get going quite fast, which I'm quite pleased about and proud about, that I was able to get in. Maybe it was more of the imposter syndrome, thinking that I was a junior developer. Maybe my skill level is higher than that when I started. So I am truly grateful to, first of all, the gentleman that took me on in my first development role, who completely took a leap of faith, massive leap of faith to bring me on as the only PHP developer. And then again to Eric and John, and the experiences I've had is amazing. I've been over to the States now twice to help run the conference, which has been an amazing experience. This year wasn't so much fun as last year, but maybe we can talk about those incidences on another show of what happened. I think Eric has hinted on it on the other podcast once or twice about the slight accident I had. But it's been an amazing experience, and I've met people, and I've been introduced to so many other people. And it's great when you go over there and you go and you realise you're sitting there talking to someone that you've been talking to for 6 months in Discord, and you go, oh, you are so and so. I did that with A-Woods, sitting there chatting to A-Woods for ages one evening, and then we suddenly clicked. Oh, you're A-Woods, and you clicked that I'm Mike Page Dev, and it's like, oh, okay, and then it's sort of the conversation carries on, and then I met you as well. I literally thought I've been reading your articles for many years, and thought you were in US. I thought you were over in the US, and then Eric introduced me to you at the speakers dinner this year, and you come out with this English accent, and I was like, I think I must have been stunned. I don't know what I looked like when you started talking to me, but I felt like I was just like, you're from the UK, you're another Brit. This is great. I've met another Brit, and then obviously we've talked ever since, and now you're a colleague as well, which is even better and great.
So what you're saying is we flew 2,000 odd miles just to meet each other.
Yeah, when
no
we're
apparent
about
reason.
No apparent reason. We live about an hour drive from each other. So yeah, that was one hell of a journey to meet someone.
So I guess we're sort of not just doing this so that we can keep telling our story. Why are we doing this podcast?
So this podcast is an idea that I came up with and I've pitched to you. And it stems from me going to PHP UK this year. Yes, it was this year. Sorry, my brain, time lines and things don't work anymore. But I was sitting there, and at the end of the day, they did a panel where they had a handful of the speakers up on stage, and they were answering questions that people had submitted through their Discord channel. And the first one that they asked was, how do we bring new developers to PHP? And this was a really interesting question to me. Before the host, the person that was running the panel, actually posed the question to the rest of the panelists. He asked everyone in the room a few questions, and first of all he asked, can everyone put your hands up in here that is a PHP developer and over the age of 35? And no word of a lie, I would say about 90% of the room put their hand up. Then he asked the question of how many people in the room that are professional PHP developers are under the age of 35. And staggeringly, there was a handful of people put their hands up. And I'm guessing the rest of the people weren't full-time developers, maybe hobbyists or had other interests, or they were the sponsors that are in the room. But that then really resonated with me, and obviously resonated with people on the stage. Now, you're going to have to help me with the pronunciation of the name because I might get it wrong. But the gentleman that runs Packagist, is it not? I'm trying to remember his name. Niles or Niels? I can't remember how to. Yes, thank you. I will apologise to anyone if I try and say your name on this show. I am rubbish with names, and then I forget how to pronounce them as well. He had a really, really interesting response to this question. His response was, we need to stop using negative words in any of our posts and videos. He said he sees a lot of videos that says PHP's not dead, look what I built, for example. And they're very good videos and they're showing off what PHP can do. The problem is anyone that has this preconception that PHP is a bad language to use, is dying out, will only read in that title PHP dead. They won't pick up the other words. After quite a lot of a discussion around this, there was a kind of a unwritten commitment to everyone in the room that we're all going to try and find ways to showcase PHP and what it can do and how good of a language it is. And that got me thinking. And I've spoken to Eric and John about this a few times, about ways that we can try and do that. And then I came up, I've been speaking to you, and I think it actually stemmed from talking about having some of the developers on the PHP Architect podcast to start introducing us to the community. And I think this was before you were a team. I think it was before you joined the team, and I think you said you should have me on there. I'm like, no, I don't know what I'll talk about. And that's when you kind of were encouraging me about podcasting. But if you're interviewing people, you don't need to have a lot to say. Mm-hmm. And that's where this podcast was born. From that conversation, I thought, and I said to you, would you like to host a podcast with me? At the time, the whole concept wasn't quite born. But put a long story short, the concept is we want to bring what is new and exciting about PHP to the rest of the world. And we want to try and bring in those people, new developers, people that are coming out of college now, people that are like yourself, that are learning how to code by coding, building games at home in their teenage years, looking at people, trying to see if we can pull people that want career changes like myself later on in years. This is all possible. And PHP is an absolute brilliant tool to use and bring you into this world. And there are so many exciting things about PHP now. It's not just about web development. There are other things there's now tools to be able to do mobile development with PHP, which is absolutely I'm on the edge of my seat about that sort of thing. So we can now build applications for any platform you can think of in PHP.
And to think that it was only 12 months ago, that wasn't even possible.
Exactly. And we'll hopefully be doing an episode about how to do that, which will be great. We'll bring that to the public. So my mission and our mission is to start bringing people into PHP or even back to PHP. The people that have used PHP back in PHP 5 days, which wasn't me. I came in at around PHP 2.7, 7.2, 7.3, I think it was the first time I used PHP. But I know that there was struggles with early on PHP and there were problems with it. But since 7's come out, my understanding is that the language has grown so much from 5 to 7. And it is growing every single year. We have a new release every single year. It's not dead. We are still here. We are still alive and kicking.
I think that's the important part, that we are alive and kicking, and just the people we have in the backlog to invite to this. It's taken us 2 weeks to get a backlog of what looks like about 30 episodes, if they all agree. I mean, I suppose we could let out the first name that we're interviewing.
Oh, do we spoiler alert? Spoiler alerts? Ooh.
I think you should.
I think we should. Well, I would describe this person as one of the loudest voices in the PHP community.
I agree.
However, I'm not entirely sure whether they've actually written any PHP code. Do you think that's enough of a clue? I'm going to leave it a clue. I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to leave it like that. You're going to have to come back to the next episode to find out who it is. We're not going to spoil it too much yet.
Yeah, so I guess that kind of leaves us at a point where we'll see you in a week's time by the sound of it.
A week's time? I thought we were doing fortnightly.
We are. We're doing.
We are doing fortnightly.
Okay. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
I was all for monthly. Chris wanted to do weekly. I have talked him down to fortnightly. So the plan is it will be fortnightly. We are planning. It's not set in stone, but hopefully it will be fortnightly on a Tuesday, and that will be at 8 p.m. UK time. So I'm going to let everyone else do all their own calculations or wherever they are in the world to work out when that is. We do have some pre-recorded ones. This one is a pre-recorded show. We are going to consider going live, so people in our Discord can join in and ask questions of our guests as well. So on that note, I think we should just say see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah. See you all in 2 weeks.